I think I might be the stupidest criminal in the history of American jurisprudence.
Yes. I didn't think you were going to
self-reflection.
We can end it right there.
Hey, Cypher here. For about half a year, Emperor Tigerstar and I have been watching and reacting to decades of propaganda videos, starting in 1919 with Bolshevism on trial. It wasn't clear where this series would go at first, but our goal was to hopefully find an art history of American propaganda. Yes, propaganda is an art form. Heck, we watched some stuff we genuinely adored, such as Why We Fight from World War II and Don't Be a Sucker just afterward. Here's a list of everything we watched. I intend to edit all of these into a large episode on the topic, because it's a great deal of fun and an important subject. Plus, on the internet, recognizing propaganda is now an existential crisis. Adequate criticism requires understanding the subject itself, and there's no better way to grasp a topic than to delve into its history. Propaganda isn't just disinformation or some ideas you dislike. It is media dedicated to propagating a message that benefits its institution's cause. It requires institutional backing, and that institution must be devoted to the same purpose of the media labeled as propaganda. One key thing we discovered along the way is that propaganda must also make an argument specifically oriented around benefiting an institution. So a recruiting advertisement isn't propaganda unless it is dedicated to arguing why joining something is good for the institution. A historical documentary isn't necessarily propaganda unless the history it publishes is dedicated to an institution's benefit, which requires dishonesty through triumphalism or denigration. Hence the movie I decided to edit together first, which was directed for the benefit of the Republican Party, specifically through misrepresenting their opponents and denying what makes history itself, which is change over time. Now, I'll betcha there's already comments claiming this very episode is propaganda. It's not. Tigerstar and I have no institutional backing for the messages contained herein. The only message we wish to propagate is that of good history, which can never be propaganda due to the requirement of adherence to an institutional message. Those who claim this is propaganda are merely trying to protect reactionaries from their critics, which means resorting to any kind of denialism possible, including the Tukokwi fallacy, as in saying, you too, as though that stops someone from being correct. Or detractors might simply impugn our biases, as though that changes whether something is true. We're certainly biased in favor of history, something reactionaries are incapable of creating due to their ideological basis in denialism. For proclaiming facts and logic, y'all regularly fail at exactly that. Such ignoramuses don't have the backbone to learn the history they so despise. Which brings us to the topic of this episode. The craziest attempt at history we'd watched in the series was the 2016 documentary Hillary's America: The Secret History of the Democratic Party. The movie is hilariously inept at what it calls history, and it includes a huge amount of dishonesty. But its current usage for denying history is the reason why I wanted to pop this out as the first of the series. In a way, this episode is kind of a debunk, but it's also an exploration of the documentary's artistic value and the director's strange obsessions. Dinesh D'Souza seems to believe his own disinformation, and he's managed to persuade enough lunatics into denying the party switch that it's a real menace. So I've put some care into editing it down and adding some entertainment. But enough with the framing, let's explore how Dinesh D'Souza distorts and abuses reality to propagate his political party in a more partisan attempt at history than we'd experienced beforehand. As Tigerstar stated, it was comedy gold. Thanks to my patrons on Patreon for their support and this episode's sponsor, MyHeritage. Given YouTube's recent demonetization spree, I need all the help I can get. MyHeritage is a genealogy service that supports research into your family history. They match your known ancestry with other people's genealogies and billions of records that they have digital access to. This episode is about the sectional realignment of American political parties from the 1860s to 1980s, and how denying that history plays a significant role in propaganda today. So it was interesting to see where the southerner and northerner parts of my family went. The Pattons were in Texas when the third party system began in 1854, and they remained in Leon County until the early 20th century when they went to Arkansas, where my grandpa was born. In the 1920s, they moved to Oklahoma in a covered wagon, but when the Great Depression hit, he did the Okie thing and went to California, hence why I was born there. Grandma MJ was a Trefsker and a Young, both families which came to California in the 1870s. The Halls, on the other hand, were all from Iowa, both on my grandma and grandpa's side, multiple generations back. They didn't move to California until my mom was a kid. Now, those things don't tell political affiliation, but both families saw the realignment of their localities, which is kinda cool to see. You can build out a family tree like this one and configure it in a bunch of ways. They help you find records to conduct such genealogical research. They can also enhance, colorize, and animate old photos. Beyond that, you can use their archives to research individuals outside your immediate tree, because ultimately, we are all related somehow. So there's a lot to do with their service, and you can get a free 2-week trial with the link below. So go check out MyHeritage, and on with the show. So today is going to be a heck of a fun stream because, oh boy, are we going to watch some crazy stuff happening. Today we're going to be watching Dinesh D'Souza's Hillary's America. Dinesh D'Souza, prior to 2016 when this movie came out, was already... We were having trouble coming up with a phrase for this, but...
Reactionary apologia, anti-civil rights apologia, like... He basically wrote books on stuff like, the civil rights people, they were exaggerating, racism was already over anyway, sort of stuff.
He argued racism ended with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, not 68. Somehow it was brought back by Obama. Not because Obama was elected, but Obama himself brought it back somehow.
It's basically really weird victim blaming.
Yeah, victim blaming is a pretty good way of understanding it. Interestingly enough, he then turns himself into a victim with this movie, basically trying to say that Obama had conspired against him to force him to violate campaign finance law.
Which he got arrested for. He basically violated campaign finance laws and went to jail. He basically used it as kind of like a prison tattoo type thing. I'm just like, yeah, that's how down with the cause I am. I went to jail because I knew too much. Prior to 2016, he wasn't a significant figure. He was just kind of a weirdo. But this movie that we're watching today, in 2016, obviously targeting the Democratic forerunner, was a big hit. Big hit. For instance, it was kind of the thing that popularized party switch denial. Because really, prior to this, party switch denial wasn't that much of a thing. I want to point out, this is a very, very poorly made poster if you just zoom into it a little bit, because this is very clearly a rock concert. You forget, Cypher. Both Hillary Clinton and rock come from the devil.
Notice that, the way she is just really poorly cropped in there. But,
yeah, I believe you called them Barbie hands, and yeah, they literally look like the hands of a plastic doll.
Yeah.
There's no way that that's actually Hillary Clinton's full body right there.
But they're also forming little fangs.
It was as soon as she started doing the YMCA dance, I saw the evil within her.
And then Dinesh D'Souza himself is right here.
Famously distinct from the crowd because remember, he's not a sheep.
And you can even tell from the poster how contrived this movie is. But I think it is pretty indicative of where propaganda was going at this point and kind of what it's become since then. D'Souza kind of began the weird right-wing doing the gotcha thing that Alan Moore pioneered, the right has appropriated.
Alan Moore, are you sure?
Michael Moore. Michael Moore.
I could just imagine the bearded, almost skeleton guy being like, now look, I thought I was pretty smart when I made Watchmen, but then I learned what was really going on.
Last time we did watch a little bit of this movie, but we're going to restart it. Sit back and relax and see where the heck this goes, because we're going to also probably end up doing a lot of debunking along the way. And notice this has like proper distribution and everything, you know?
I always knew Lionsgate sucked. Quality.
Don't know about that.
D'Souza de Media.
This is a true story thing is something that only a few filmmakers delve into doing, most of the time as a joke. One such instance was Walker from the 1980s. Another example would be Birth of a Nation, something that he's going to have a lot of fun talking about, but he's the one mimicking it here. And then there's 13 Hours, I think, or 12 Hours, or something like that. Although this is also a documentary, so why do you need to say this is a true story if it's a documentary?
I don't have a problem. You have a problem.
Yeah, basically that. Because, man, the lies are gonna fly fast and
for
loose.
all of the liberal naysayers who may say that my documentary is wrong, I'd like to point out to the very beginning when I said it was right.
Hit it, boys!
So apparently this is a cover of Happy Days, which is a song most associated with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But here's the thing, apparently they're saying crappy days? I'm not hearing that at all.
Yeah, I didn't hear that either. How could they pull one on over us like so?
Notice that they're trying to be like, look how evil the Democrats are. I'll point out that the last image, that is very obviously supposed to be what's called the Navajo Long Walk, which was a march of Navajos from their homeland in what is now northern Arizona to Bosque Redondo in central eastern plains, New Mexico. Now, this was ordered by a guy named General Carlton, who was a Republican. This is during the Civil War. I'll bet you he'll say that the KKK was founded by Nathan Bedford Forrest.
This is what I want to bring up, though, especially when it comes to like party switch denial stuff. It's simultaneously amusing and it drives me nuts. Is they'll act like no one ever teaches you that Lincoln was a good guy Republican and the KKK was founded by bad guy Democrats. It's like, yeah, we do. I learned that in middle school, high school, college, on my own time, every book I've ever read on the subject. This isn't like some secret truth. Okay, yeah. Maybe the average American doesn't know it in the same way that they don't know a lot of things, but they're not hiding it. But in terms of acting like that it's like this revelation, like it's this cover-up, this smoking gun, it's like, no, it's not.
The argument here is going to be that the Democrat Party hasn't changed since then, that that the sides have not realigned at all. Yeah, we're gonna see a lot of the Democrats were the bad guys, and look, they were super racist, and it's like,
yeah, they were.
Yeah, nobody's disagreeing with you
Yeah,
there.
like if you want to argue the parties haven't changed, then limit your scope to that instead of just, I mean, I know why he's patting it on. Like, he's taking advantage of the average American's ignorance of history in general.
Yes. I gotta point out, that's Wilson throwing out the first ball at the National League. You gotta admit, though, this is kind of a very slick intro. They're packing a lot of meaning into it.
The production is high effort, and yet the Photoshop is low effort.
Right.
In terms of accuracy.
Or just, in 2016, I was already making videos that had far more accuracy than this. You were, too. Oh, I'm so excited for that scene.
Famous signing of the Jim Crow law.
Yeah, he just passed it into law.
A common misconception in school is that they tell you that Jim Crow are laws, plural, but it was actually a single law signed by a single Democrat.
Yeah, it might be Margaret Sanger, because she was a Democrat and she was also very much a eugenicist. They're going to do the whole like Planned Parenthood is eugenics. It's like it started off that way, but like I literally just did a video about this today.
You know what also was eugenics? Literally everything.
Right. Yeah. And people honestly believe they were like helping the world.
It's like lobotomies. As fucked up as they were, people thought they were helping.
Yeah, exactly. And this wasn't something particular to any party, just progressives believed in it.
Especially because like it was just considered like the forefront of science at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, now I want to make like a satire / parody conspiracy video. The reason why the Beach Boys think that the California girl is the greatest girl of them all is because California had some of the toughest eugenics laws.
And you mean they're going to stop me from having children ever?
Why is it all on fire?
The Cubs lost, man. That was a bad Photoshop squint. And now we're going to see this whiny sore loser complain that he went to jail for breaking the law.
It all began when the Obama administration tried to shut me up.
Please be
This
seated.
is so freaking staged.
Mr.
I know,
D'Souza
it's
is
like
vilified.
just not at all how you run a court. It's hilarious.
If it were not Mr. D'Souza, we'd have a different conversation. There is not.
Everybody just like to the yes, everybody agrees. Yeah.
It's laid on so thick, you could just hear this droning in the background of, I am Jesus, I am Jesus.
Okay, so I think now I understand. This is supposed to be his sentencing hearing.
Yes. And
Which
it's
why-
so wrong.
You can't bring new arguments to a sentencing hearing. That's not how it works.
That he be locked up overnight for 8 months in a community confinement center.
Oh,
5 years.
The women weep for the
Mr.
loss of
D'Souza-
such a Chad.
he doesn't even make himself look good in this. Like,
No, well, I mean, when you're working with that, that's pretty difficult. But you,
And what was my real crime?
I transmit this information to Vladimir and his network.
2,000 Russian forces in
oh, I forgot about this. He actually blames frickin' Obama for Russia invading Ukraine in 2014.
he was like, I mean, yeah, it's stupid, but it's honestly a very common talking point.
It's like,
He's weak in foreign policy, therefore anything that goes against U.S. interests is his fault.
so just blatantly stupid on the face of it, you know?
It is, but it's a normal, blatantly stupid thing for him to say. Honestly, this applies to both parties. Like, oh, a president met with a dictator. It's like foreign diplomacy is kind of a part of his job. Like,
Yeah.
Dinesh, of course, is now pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine.
But apparently, parties never realign, never change their positions.
No, of course not. We've always been at war with East Asia.
Obama will bring major industries under the rod of government control.
Obamacare
If
premiums across the country
only.
sky.
If only. That's the other classic of making the Democrat more effective than they actually are. Biden is a communist who's going to slay God. Whoa, really? That sounds awesome. Why can't they actually be as cool as they fearmonger they are?
The accusations flying from this are just incredible.
You go to a white-collar prison, Martha Stewart type, you get tennis courts and libraries. Inmates are mayors, business execs, doctors stealing med.
Okay, well, this is obviously staged.
Yeah,
Are they trying to say that he didn't go to a low-security prison?
Well, of course not, because remember, to him, this is his prison tattoo. This is what he went through for exposing the truth, man. He has to make it look cool.
And upon further inspection, he went to a halfway house, not a prison, one extremely similar to Martha Stewart. The lies fly thick and fast with reactionaries like D'Souza. I won't pop in like this to fact-check again, but this one was particularly egregious, since it's the framing device for his entire conspiracy theory.
Don't be gentle.
Don't be gentle. Wow. Now,
Why include that?
well, why not have a racist stereotype? Remember, all black guys are brutal beasts that got sent to jail and secretly want to be raped and or rape you. It's a very dumb racist cliche.
Who actually believes this is the kind of prison he went to?
Gullible people. Very gullible people.
Also, this looks like a high school gym that they've formatted to look like a prison.
Let's not get too cozy, huh? When I get back to my wife, I don't want to wake up in the morning and whisper your name.
Remember, booty is the currency.
It's a high high school gym!
For years, I've had an idealized picture of America. What's dawning on me now is that I've been too focused on America as it ought to be.
Oh, look. Now it's just a gym.
You gotta have the classic, I'm tough. I'm learning to survive.
There's another America, the America of the street.
The America of the
America
street
of the street.
that he's discovered.
If I was going to survive, I would have to learn to get down with it, ya dig. This is the America of putting your cap sideways and showing your grills and chains. I'm telling you, this is a comedy classic.
Political gangs, they own you.
He's gonna say that the Democrats are like a prison gang. Oh my god. I know what it's like on the inside, bruh. And I could tell you, them Democrats, they're just like the Aryan Brotherhood.
The Obama people believe I need to be re-educated.
Since when is like psyche val's like re-education?
Occupation, scholar.
America is a country based on ideas, based on assimilation to a certain way of life.
You gotta like how he's like, Obama is trying to change my way of thinking and make me assimilate with his vision of America. America is about assimilation.
So what are you in for? Drug smuggling.
Armed robbery.
Like he's doing frickin' interviews in prison and everything.
What?
He's trying to paint a picture of, I'm the one who's here as a political prisoner. All these other miscreants are miscreants and deserve what they got.
I think I might be the stupidest criminal in the history of American jurisprudence.
Yes. I didn't think you were gonna
self-reflection.
We can end it right there.
People committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
It's very telling that he decided to bad things done in the name of Christ, because that triggers so many people. How dare you imply that a person who was a believer ever did a bad thing? It's I don't know what to tell you. That's kind of a part of the lore.
It's a weird persecution complex that doesn't make any sense, especially in America.
Step one, get a plan.
Burr, burr, burr.
Listen up, everybody. Sit down. What we're gonna start to do, we're gonna be selling life insurance.
They all sit down and they all do it.
You sign up today, we'll give you $5,000.
On the spot.
Yeah.
I'm confused how this is supposed to work. Is this work as a parody of politics? I mean, you still have to have the money to dole it out.
Well, that's just it, Cypher. The government is spending money it doesn't have.
Except for it makes the money.
Well, yeah, real economists know that, but remember, this is the Republican way of thinking. This is the analogy that they're going for.
It's a really dumb analogy. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it is a dumb analogy, but nevertheless, it's the one they like to use.
Months after they sign up, they just die.
Hey, Pops.
My job is to shut the door.
That's not how life insurance works. Sellers can't make themselves beneficiaries, and the cost of a payout is paid for by everyone else still paying the insurance. This is really basic stuff.
I don't know. I don't know why I'm trying to make sense out of this. It's dumb.
Yeah, it's just so... It makes no frickin' sense.
Well, Cypher, clearly you don't understand suspension of disbelief. Just shut up and accept, and this is how it works. Wow!
Never give up the con. Deny, deny, deny.
How'd you get caught?
Snitch, man.
That's the plot of the thing, is that step 1, give $5,000 to random people. Step 2, kill them. Step 3, question mark.
But again,
Step 4,
Cypher, this is the connection
profit.
to politicians. They give out money they don't have, they do crimes, they secretly murder their dissident enemies, and lie. He's got a McConnell face.
Each con follows the same formula.
They pitch you a policy, they take away your rights / money in the form of tax, and then they lie that they ever did anything wrong. Classic Democrat.
You remember how we've had a number of propaganda pieces thus far that have laid out like an entire argument with clear points and everything. He basically just tried to do that, right? But his schema is plan, pitch, take, deny, right? it doesn't work as an argument.
It's less so making an argument in the traditional sense of here's the evidence, here's how I'm connecting the evidence, and here's why. It's more of, look, this is how it is. He's like trying to make the argument from that direction rather than from the ground up.
From his knowledge of the streets, yo.
He's trying to reword what he already believes, hoping that it'll just click with you.
Rather than actually making an argument.
Yeah.
That does seem something unique about 21st century propaganda, is that they're not even like really trying to make a good argument.
Well, yeah, from an argument's perspective, it doesn't make sense. But if you look at it from the perspective of how can I get you to understand that Democrats are evil, da 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 da.
This is very much preaching to the choir. Yeah, it's also possible that this isn't some sort of indication of propaganda as an art form, but more like an indication of D'Souza's ineptitude.
Standards have dropped.
I'm a scholar, written a bunch of books.
Oh, it pains me. He just called himself a scholar. He had actually written 4 books, and let me just list the titles of them real quick. The first one being The End of Racism, a book about what's so great about America. The Enemy at Home, the cultural left and its responsibility for 9/11.
A law was clear from the beginning. The workers will be liberated.
D'Souza also argues that Abu Ghraib torture and prison abuse was a result of the sexual immodesty of liberal America.
Yeah, I mean, Bush was just secretly a liberal the entire time.
And asserts that the conditions of the prisoners at Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay are comparable to the accommodations in mid-level Eastern hotels. This guy's a crackpot, and he's calling himself a freaking scholar.
What do I really know about the Democratic Party?
Yeah, what do you actually know about the Democratic Party? That's a good question. You don't seem to know much.
Every line is like comedy gold.
Dude, when I said this was a comedy classic, I was not lying. And
you know that we're only 18 minutes in?
I know.
Who are these Democrats? What's their racket?
I love how it goes from, who are these Democrats? I don't know who these Democrats are. Are they the big crooks? You went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds flat, bruh.
You see, Richard Nixon said he wasn't a crook, and he's a Republican. Therefore, logically...
That's going to be the Republicans all day. That's the party for slavery. Racist. That's a bunch of rich fat cats. Now, they're probably be.
Yeah, there are people that are that ignorant out there. But no one goes, man, Republicans be the party of slavery, yo.
Literally never heard that.
No one was taught this ever.
An official announcement coming from Hillary Clinton that she is officially in the race for the White House.
The prison inmates care so much about Hillary Clinton.
After Hillary gave her very heartwarming performance at Folsom Prison, I mean, she truly became the woman of the prisoners, you know? America.
What if their plan is to steal America?
So the guy who was saying that the Republicans are the real crooks, so, you know, they're the party of slavery or whatever. Turns out Democrats were the party of slavery. Show the guy's shock and then do the tung. I'm surprised I have to give filmmaking advice to somebody who is actually quite seasoned. As effective propaganda, this doesn't work, so I guess that's why we're having so much fun with it. But at the same time, this argument really took hold.
Talking about taking over every industry, education, the media.
They're just gonna take all of this stuff?
It was a 150-year process since the Civil War.
Is he gonna pull a Bircher thing and try to say that, like, it's the secret communist frickin' takeover, but this time of Confederates?
I'm not saying anything.
The thieves of America want to take it all. They want to own you.
But the idea of the government is turning us into slaves, man.
Oh yeah, I mean that goes back
well
before the Civil War. That was basically one of the key arguments during the American Revolution. Excellent book on that is called White Freedom.
I got Obama right. Now I need to figure out Hillary.
Every fucking line in this thing.
In preparation of this, I almost considered giving you like either a bingo sheet or like a drinking game of some kind, but I knew that if I did, you would die on stream.
If you look at the lady in the blue suit and look at the picture directly to her left, that is Thomas Jefferson, notably not a Democrat.
There, are you a registered Democrat?
I'm from Mumbai.
What the hell just happened?
Well, because if he says no, then he might get kicked out. So he had to give an indirect answer. Remember, this is the evil organization, Cypher. You can't be too careful.
Oh, he's going to argue that like the organization itself is a freaking.
Well, they're criminals. Remember, they're a gang.
Tools and the truth. You'll work with us to spread the word. You're going to help us define the Republican brand.
Calling for equal pay and paid leave.
What even is going on here? Like
he's acting like that the DNC headquarters doubles as like a museum / propaganda center.
That's an awful museum. Like, look at all the screens and everything. I've seen many half-baked exhibits because I basically grew up in museums, and this would be the worst at communicating anything.
That's the party of economic opportunity, social justice, and racial equality. That's their pitch. But is it true? What's Abraham Lincoln doing here? He was the founder of the Republican Party.
He was not the founder.
He wasn't even the first Republican presidential candidate. Come on. What a way to frickin' throw John C. Fremont under the bus. How are you this incompetent?
No one can answer that question.
Also, remember that he contrived this exhibit. Acting outraged by his own creation is straight out of the reactionary handbook, I guess.
People think the Democratic Party was founded by FDR.
No
What?
one thinks that. This is erasure of Francis Preston Blair.
Out of that split came the Democratic Party, and a little later, the Republican Party.
This is a National Republican Party erasure, Whig erasure, Know Nothing erasure.
The Democrats elected a man who would uphold their principles.
Oh, there it is!
His name was Andrew Jackson.
Clearly, the Democrats have done everything to erase Jackson from our memories, such as putting him on the $20 bill.
President that Dinesh D'Souza supported had a very prominent fixation on Old Hickory.
But how did Jackson win over the ordinary Democrat?
The ordinary Democrat... Democrats didn't exist yet. What the... The thing that made him popular was winning the Battle of New Orleans, you absolute dolt.
The American Indians. He massacred them. He burned their homes and villages. He then sold that land at bargain basement prices to white settlers in exchange for their votes.
Yeah, we've never hidden this. We've taught this in schools.
Indian removal is not what got him elected.
Yeah, that's just dumb.
His campaigns that basically got us Florida, which was the Seminole War, and the Creek War as well, which involved a lot of massacres and everything, gained him a lot of fame. But I've never actually heard anybody try to argue that he won the election because of those. Just look at his actual campaign.
And most people who just don't know, they're just going to fall for it.
If you think that he was the only one who was running a bunch of wars against Indians, I've got a bridge to sell you, you know?
And of course, it's kind of funny because the same people who would eat up this argument go, oh, do you think we should maybe give more land back to Native Americans or maybe some sort of recompense, perhaps? No.
Actually, no.
Wow, okay. Yeah, you suddenly care when it's convenient to your political argument.
This is the Democrats' fault because they were founded by Jackson. It's like, that's a picture from 1879 that was done by a Republican president.
We cannot rightfully take Indian land by violence.
Yes, that would totally win a round of applause from all of Congress.
And that was an actual quote. Something you have to understand about the Indian Removal Acts is that they were fiercely debated, even within the Democratic Party.
But the Democrats passed it, and Jackson signed it into law.
Plenty of Democrats were opposed to it as well.
The Jackson Democrats embraced another theft scheme: slavery.
Indian removal is 1830s. He's saying that like Indian removal was to prop up slavery. 3 of the 5 tribes that were removed through these particular acts were slave-owning tribes. This doesn't make any sense.
Jackson owned hundreds of slaves.
Jackson is bad, slavery is bad, yes.
Because the party was racist through and through.
Yes, no
The
one's denying
Republican
this.
Party, the most notorious defender of slavery, Andrew Jackson's vice president.
Okay, that wig.
For a time, and that's kind of important to say.
And it was, according to Andrew Jackson, his biggest regret of a person he did not kill.
John C. Calhoun wasn't so much of like a famous defender of slavery at this point. Nothing in history is static. Everything's changing. That's the first C in the 5 C's.
No, remember,
change over time.
Nope, Cypher people never change. If you did an evil thing, you were always evil. The world is black and white. There's no such thing as gray.
The portrayal of John C. Calhoun being completely aligned with Jackson, after all, he was his vice president. It's like, he was the vice president of John Quincy Adams, kind of like our cool abolitionist guy as well. Like, come on.
A positive good.
A moral justification for slavery?
This is in 1838. This is well after he broke with frickin' Jackson.
Democrats try to duck their party's responsibility for slavery by blaming it on the South.
Is he somehow going to lost cause of this?
I mean, you kind of have to if you want to deny the party switch.
Their ingenious advocate was Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas.
And also, again, we weren't hiding any of this. We were taught this in school.
Look, Stephen Douglas is a complicated figure, and like, I don't want to try to like defend him or anything, but like to say that he was a slavery defender is just...
It was not his main issue.
His main issue was railroads. His creation of the Kansas-Nebraska Act was basically to placate a northern route for the railroads, which I will point out, a northern route for the transatlantic line would have been anti-slavery. He was kind of weird because he was willing to placate slave owners in order to play the long game against slavery, but he was actually kind of anti-slavery. He absolutely exacerbated the slavery issue. Do not get me wrong on that. But to play that, like, you know, this arch defender is playing into literal conspiracy theories that even Lincoln admitted to it being a conspiracy theory. I have an entire episode on this. How is it that I debunked this, like, without even knowing that I debunked it?
And he envisioned slavery lasting forever, not just in America, but spreading to other countries as well.
Is he about to try to make Stephen Douglas into one of the Knights of the Golden Circle?
Vehemently denounced slavery. He got a most extraordinary response.
The killing of Charles Sumner is somehow supposed to be not in defense of the South? That has nothing to do with party, that has everything to do with sectionalism. Is he literally trying to say that the sectional crisis was about Democrats versus Republicans?
Yes.
Oh my fucking god.
Look, we need to stop being surprised by the lazy history.
This isn't just lazy history, this is like fundamentally hateful.
So what's more depressing, the fact that he likely believes this, or the fact that so many people bought it?
I've never heard the idea that the South wasn't the ones pushing slavery, it was really the Democrats.
The attack nearly killed him.
It was like 3 hits and it didn't even break the cane? Come on, bruh.
The Democrats support slavery and think it should be extended, while we, Republicans, oppose slavery.
Yeah, Lincoln wanted to control the spread of slavery and was basically anti-slavery, but he was not as vociferous about it in the beginning. Like the Stephen Douglas debates they're out there. We know them pretty well. They're literally a cliche in high school debates at this point.
If you've read them, then you know that he has to equivocate so often. And now he's showing pictures of the Middle Passage, which had been illegal in the United States since 1807.
Slavery is the theft of a person's life and freedom and the fruit of their labor.
Did he just care about stolen fruits of labor? Sounds very commie to me.
We often hear of the Civil War as a contest between the anti-slavery North and the pro-slavery South. This is Democratic Party propaganda.
It's Democratic Party propaganda to make the Democratic South pro-slavery.
I want to make this stop. The pretense of, oh, I'm so mad that the Democrats are hiding this history, and then literally saying that the sectional crisis was just a contest between Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans won in 1860 basically because the Democrats split, and they split over slavery. They split Northern and Southern Democrats.
It's so interesting how he decided to go with like Stephen Douglas as opposed to like Breckinridge, the Southern Democrat who was very pro-slavery.
The Democrats did not solidify as a sectional party until after the Civil War. Republicans being a party of the North, they were basically the first sectional party. The Whigs were not a sectional party. The Democrats were not a sectional party. I mean, heck, even the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans were not sectional parties. It is purely the sectional crisis that hinged on the issue of slavery that destroyed American politics and led to the Civil War. That is a key thing to understanding the Civil War. I was expecting funny, stupid. This isn't funny anymore.
Didn't some Republicans own slaves?
Yes.
Actually, no.
What?
No.
He's just lying now.
The Civil War is better understood as a contest between the anti-slavery Republican Party and the pro-slavery Democratic Party.
Because anti-slavery Democrats just didn't exist.
George McClellan, I guess, was just never a Democrat.
How the hell did any Democrats get elected in the North then? How the hell did Lincoln have to run with a Democrat as his vice president in 1864 if it was just a contest between Republicans and Democrats the entire war? Many of the secessionists were Whigs. The traitor president, Tyler, Democrats were not some unified section. They were a party.
Citizenship, equal rights, and the right to vote. The Democrats couldn't believe it, so they killed the father of the Republican Party.
The Democrats did it. How ignorant do you have to be in order to try to pin the assassination of Abraham Lincoln on an entire political party? I'm legitimately angered by all that.
You triggered, liberal, you triggered. Propaganda is all fun and games until someone gets brainwashed.
I don't know how to describe this, but like when I'm forced to watch this kind of thing,
It's draining.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why this is draining, not only because it's like just that blatant, but you know, it's so real with everything that's going on right now.
Only 2016. I had to take a break from this due to how draining that was. I never thought I'd find a lost causer and a party switch denier in the same person. They seem to be opposing conspiracy theories. But sure enough, D'Souza managed to find a way. Tigerstar and I reconvened a few weeks later after having watched another propaganda piece in the meantime. We got back to having fun because Hillary's America is comedy gold, at least if you can disregard all the bigotry it espouses. Speaking of candidates who really shouldn't have been the Democratic forerunner, let's talk about Hillary and how the Democratic Party has always been the exact same and never changed. Because that's how history works. The first C of history. Change does not happen over time. He's going to try to say that Redeemer Democrats are exactly the same thing as Democrats today.
The Democrats don't want you to know about this civil rights movement because they fought against it.
It's the Democrats currently using the 14th Amendment to try to disqualify Trump from running.
You know, there was the whole like 1619 project you guys were bitching about. Apparently we talked about it too much. No, we actually don't talk about it at all. Whether it's this or so many other things, a lot of those various like reactionary accounts will post something that happened and go, yeah, well, these woke Democrats don't teach it in schools. Yeah, we do. Did you not pay attention or take notes or something? At the very least, like, you know, it's not something we're trying to hide.
To say that this is something they don't want you to know about would require some sort of evidence of attempting to silence this history. Biggest historian of Reconstruction, Eric Foner, being a staunch Democrat.
The civil rights revolution of the 1960s did nothing more than secure guarantees for equal rights and voting rights that had already been put into the Constitution 100 years previously by the Republican Party.
It's true, yeah. But notice that things had changed by the 1960s. Notice that he just skips 100 years? What the fuck?
Nothing to see here.
Today's Democrats take credit for civil rights legislation, but what was their contribution?
The guy who signed it was a Democrat?
JFK was specifically campaigning in Texas to push his proposal for what would become the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Next week, I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act, to make a commitment it is not fully made in this century to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
That's why he was there.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Do not be deterred by the fact that I ran as a Democrat. I've been secretly a New England Republican this entire time. That's why I brought down taxes. Yeah.
And there's a reason why he brought Johnson in as his VP.
No memorial oration or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long.
He wanted that Southern vote, despite the fact that he was a Northern Democrat.
Stop filibustering it so it could pass.
One of the Democrats, the biggest of the filibusterers, switched to the Republican Party as a consequence of losing that fight. And look what Barry Goldwater ran on. He basically ran on rescinding the Civil Rights Act.
Have you watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? When the audience is like, oh, you know, you're actually convincing me with real evidence here. But that's not how any of this works. That's basically this whole documentary.
I'm dug in, and I'll never change. These were all the smartest scientists on the planet. Only problem is, they kept being wrong. This is insane, you fool! I'm a fool because I have more faith in the saints that wrote the Bible? Yeah.
It's exactly like that, where it's like, here are some cherry-picked isolated facts, but without the context behind them.
Yeah.
Therefore, proving me right.
Here's one of the easiest tests for whether or not something is history. Does it try to address the 5 C's? Do you remember what the 5 C's are?
Let's see. Communism, capitalism, China, California.
California spelled with a K.
Calvin Coolidge, yeah.
Change over time, as in narrative process. Complexity, causality, contingency, context. Does Dinesh D'Souza try to address any of that?
Yes, just very badly.
I don't think he's done any contextualization whatsoever. The whole thing with complexity is knowing that there is more nuance to a topic than you can ever give. So you try to imply that there's more nuance.
The nuance is saying that the Democrats are the real racists. That is the nuance cipher. Challenges your worldview.
He is establishing a narrative. The first C is kind of fulfilled, but not adequately. He's actually kind of denying the first C, change over time. He's arguing that a political party hasn't changed over the course of more than a century.
Look, we all know that Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Bill Clinton, and Obama are exactly the same. Name any differences between them. You can't do
their names.
You know, there are just some things that are like the lessons of so many books, movies, TV shows, video games, and so on, that I think, how have you not learned this by now? Mm-hmm. Here's another one. Things change. You may not like it, but there's nothing you can do about it, so suck it up. Do you realize how many things have
just
that?
History itself. That's the first C of history. Change over time.
I'm sorry, change over time is actually delta, not C.
Another word for change over time is narrative. If you don't have something that changes over time, there is no narrative. There's a lot of work that goes into trying to establish what all of this stuff is, and a lot of argument and a lot of having to understand the 5 C's of history, and that's clearly not what Dinesh D'Souza is doing here.
The Republican Party set aside 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land and began dividing it to give freed slaves 40 acres.
Yes, the redistribution of material resources. That sounds very not left-wing.
He wants reparations?
Cue the Anakin and Padme meme. Oh, so you'll give them reparations, right? Right?
I want to point out that he is mixing up 2 different things here. So he's talking about 40 acres and a mule. This was a general order put out by Sherman specifically about Georgia because, he was marching through Georgia at the time and everything, and said that any slaves that they ran into during this, and is basically like, we're going to split up the plantations. You guys get 40 acres and a mule, so long as the army can provide. The 40 acres and a mule order was rescinded just after the war. That has nothing to do with the Southern Homestead Act. But the Southern Homestead Act is what D'Souza is referring to here. That's an act of Congress, which Johnson actually signed into law. and he did not have much control over it since he was in office for only 2 more years. And in fact, the law was repealed under a Republican president, that being Grant. So D'Souza is a charlatan. I want to point out that that flag did not exist at this time. For Pete's sake, D.W. Griffith got it correct. How are you this incompetent?
Fought to stop the 13th Amendment, which permanently abolished slavery. 77% of Democrats voted against it.
77%, so there were 23% who did vote for it.
Don't listen to his mumbo-jumbo fancy lawyer language.
Bruh, you don't even have to say the percentages or anything. Just say most Democrats voted against it. You could say that and get away with it. But as soon as you put in the percentages, we see right through your freaking bullshit.
The Democratic Party is the party of the Trail of Tears, broken treaties.
Okay, I don't think anyone can argue that Republicans were particularly good at upholding Indian treaties. It was a Republican Congress that abrogated all treaties in 1871. So to say that, like, Republicans weren't part of the problem there is hilariously illiterate, to the point of comedy. How is he taken seriously?
Because he's token minority going along with Republican points. And it makes it easier for him to go, see, we're not racially biased at all. We got one of the good ones. I mean, we've got one of them agreeing with us.
The Democrats needed a new con. I'm reminded of what Rock told me.
Now we gotta get a new plan.
I was in jail, yo. I know what it's like on the streets. That's how I know what the Democratic policy is. I just happen to have a skateboard here. Look what sticker I have on it.
It's funny that he focuses on that because that's exactly what the Republicans did. Man, the plan isn't working anymore. We need a new one, perhaps a strategy down south, if you will. This is just projection.
And just watching how they use blacks for their agenda.
Like, yes, there are politicians that will use the race issues and the race card to advance their agenda because that's just what politicians do. But that does not change the material things that Democrats have done in that cause.
The opposition to the Civil Rights Act is now Republicans.
Yeah, because like whenever someone's like, well, you see, the Democrats are the party of the KKK. It's like, yes, they once were. Who do the KKK support now?
I directly address these things, and I couldn't come up with a way to explain that away within this kind of mindset.
Because today we're talking about the party switch. It's not like the parties ever actually switched. The Democrats are just as racist as they've always been. Well, the KKK was founded by Democrats. Not exactly. In fact, the Klan was actually founded as a theater troupe in Tennessee originally, but it quickly morphed into a paramilitary terrorist organization for Southern Redeemers, who were Democrats. And even with the second Klan, it was a Democratic president who basically fostered them into being through his historian credentials and approval of their foundational film, Birth of a Nation. And yes, I am referring to Woodrow Wilson. Wilson! But guess what, Crypto? Many prominent Klan members today actually openly support Republican presidents. You're more likely to see Republicans waving Confederate flags and pushing the lost cause myth than their Democratic forebearers. Dude, those guys don't count. They're outside whack jobs. But they do when it's convenient for you, right? Sure.
They straight up just don't have an explanation for why somehow things haven't changed.
They're taking things to match their presupposed conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, one could argue that that's kind of what we all do, but I think there's one of the key things that we're seeing, especially now, once we're getting to newer forms of propaganda, is that it's less about making an argument as opposed to giving a form of rhetoric for people to use.
Like, yeah, we're all guilty of doing it in some ways.
Yeah.
Like this.
I mean, we all have confirmation bias.
They're not addressing the contradictions in their argument because it's not useful to them.
They're not even looking for contradictions.
They're cherry picking what they need to back up what they're saying at the most minimal level.
But it's not so much about the cherry picking itself, it's about what they're trying to do with it. thing here is that it is less about trying to convince people, instead using people who are already kind of like in the fold to just spam this argument over and over and over again. Like all those comments that we get on our channels from these kinds of lunatics seem less to be just like a sincerely held belief and more just repeating the propaganda they've already been fed. And that's kind of the point. It's to mobilize people into just repeating this bullshit and, scoring political points.
The Ku Klux Klan was founded by Nathan Bedford Forrest.
No, it wasn't. Nathan Bedford Forrest was the first Grand Dragon, but it certainly was not founded by him. That's just a flat-out lie.
The whole purpose of the Democratic Party was to reestablish white supremacy.
Northern Democrats are different from Southern Democrats. It's section, not party.
But you know what? They acknowledged white supremacy was the thing in America. That's very bold of them to do so. Normally, they don't even go that far.
She's confusing bourbons with redeemers. Redeemers wanted to redeem the South for white supremacy, while bourbons were fiscal conservatives opposed to Republican corruption. They're very different things.
What blacks actually needed was Second Amendment rights.
Oh, I think there's a guy that Dinesh should chat with. His name was Huey Newton. And then, when blacks did finally decide to arm themselves, the Democrats forced Governor Reagan's hand to sign the gun control bill in California.
There's certainly nothing that can be done in the line of goodwill when Americans have guns.
1873, a fight between black people and the KKK. 62 to 153 dead. Then there's like laws about like who can carry arms and all that. It goes all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, which has mostly Republican appointees, rules against black people owning guns because it is not within the federal government's power. You can't apply federal powers to the states. But under the 14th Amendment, you can. This was already bunk 2 years after it was ruled. It wouldn't be until 1939 that Second Amendment rights are applied to individuals.
Was none other than President Woodrow Wilson.
Tell me about the screening of the film called The Birth of a Nation.
Wilson!
Was a racist movie by a racist Democratic president.
The movie wasn't by Wilson. It was screened by Wilson. It was by D.W. Griffith, who was a prominent Republican his entire life. Though it's based on a book by a Democrat, a staunch Redeemer Democrat, who happened to be roommates with Wilson at one point. What? What even was that?
A great Ku Klux
He's like
Klan
chasing me onto the plot.
of the intolerable burden of government.
In 1914, Ida B. Wells and a group of black leaders confronted him.
1914 is before 1915, which is a year before the birth of a nation. In order to get causality correct, you have to do proper chronology. If you want to make the argument that the Democrats have never changed, focusing on Wilson is an excellent way to do so, because there's a lot of Democrats who will fight for Wilson's legacy tooth and nail today. Not just his racial policies were the problem. His frickin' international policies were the problem. You can quote the 14 points at me all you want. Try actually looking at his policy rather than an inspirational speech he gave in January of 1918 in the midst of a war.
I think everyone should have the right to self-determination. But what about the Filipinos?
There's some things that he did in Eastern Europe that was like bringing back Poland.
We will give Poland a warm water port, Russia. Oh, come on.
He immediately went against his 14 points, and such a settlement of all questions affecting Russia as will secure the best and freest cooperation of the other nations of the world in obtaining for her an unhampered and embarrassed opportunity for the independent determination of her own political development and national policy, so self-determination for Russia. What does he do less than 2 months after this? This is how funny it is. Look at the photo preview when you go to, the independent determination of her own political development and national policy. Look at that photo preview. Do you notice what is literally the only flag in that picture of the Russian Civil War. The only flag. What's the only flag?
Malaysia. It's definitely Malaysia.
So you have a bunch of American troops marching down Vladivostok in 1918. How damning is that for the people who are like, well, what about the 14 points? What about them?
Just because he made 14 points doesn't mean he has a point. We're making the world safe for democracy. No, not that way. No, not that way.
Not for the brown people.
I am making it unsafer for you.
He didn't make the world safe for democracy. He made the world safe for American interventionism.
But you see, that's the genius. By screwing up so badly, all of those rebel groups finally decided to self-determine things for themselves.
FDR didn't have the votes to pass the New Deal program, so he promised the Democratic Party that he would block any anti-lynching legislation and he would exclude blacks from most New Deal programs.
Southern veto. It's called the Southern veto. This is something I actually teach about. Yeah, it's called the Southern veto. It's well understood. It was a concession he had to make as a Democrat. But will they talk about, we replaced Dr. New Deal with Dr. Win the War, often called the Third New Deal, and how that changed American racial relations? Are they going to talk about that whatsoever?
And that continued with the Great Society, right? With Johnson.
Okay, no, okay.
Oh my God. Okay, so they're trying to argue that the Great Society is... still has the Southern veto, which no, what?
So apparently, Republicans feel strongly about the supposed negative effects of the Great Society.
Oh, I mean, the Great Society was the main form of welfare that Republicans have been running against constantly ever since.
I know, but the concept of it specifically being bad for black people.
Yeah, this is going to be that basic argument of welfare enslaves black people, actually.
I want to have them voting Democratic for the next 200 years.
Okay, so that's actually supposed to be a quote. A viral quote circulated in the 1990s attributed to him as that exact quote. As they say, there's no question that the LBJ, despite championing the landmark Civil Rights Act and signing into law, was also a sometime racist and notorious vulgarian. That's one way to say it. Who rarely shied away from using the N-word in private. It's quite possible that he might have said this, but at the same time, it doesn't prove anything. It just talks about him personally being an asshole. And I don't think anybody doubts that LBJ was an asshole. But they're trying to use it as see, we've enslaved black people by giving them civil rights. Whoa!
Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
The big switch seems to be supported by the fact that blacks, who used to vote Republican, did switch over to the Democratic Party. Also, Southern whites, who used to uniformly vote Democratic, now vote Republican. But wait a minute, blacks switched to the Democratic Party in the 1930s. Southern whites moved over to the Republican Party much later.
It's as if it was like a gradual process rather than a single event or something.
History has changed over time! Oh my God! Imagine that! I think this is a point we know where everything's going. We can skip towards the end.
I mean, we all know what they're going to say. They've already made their supposed point.
If Hillary Clinton is president and this apparatus continues to hum along and expands, how bad it's truly going to be.
Now we know why Hillary ignored those emergency calls for help from Benghazi. Couldn't figure out how to make a buck off of them.
Benghazi!
Before her emails, it was her Benghazi. My God.
Republicans really couldn't shut up about Benghazi, even when they knew they were wrong. First, Hillary was Secretary of State, not Defense. Second, there were a bunch of congressional investigations before this movie came out, and they couldn't find any fault. But D'Souza has got to peddle his conspiracy theory anyways.
Storing secret emails on her private server.
And there were no security.
Because she's somehow making money on it? What?
And we know the secret history of the Democratic Party.
One, I really hate the term secret history.
Anytime a Democrat is in office, they record history using incognito mode, hiding the truth.
It wasn't a Republican who was famous for secret recordings and trying to suppress all of those recordings from getting to Congress.
I should make a video called The Untold Story of Cipher Hating Wilson just to make you upset.
The whole, oh, there's a secret history. This isn't secret at all. If history was truly secret, then you couldn't write about it, because you wouldn't have the evidence to back up your story. Oh wait, that's exactly what D'Souza has done.
Then progressivism through confiscatory taxation and regulation took something from everyone.
As in taxation. It was Wilson who implemented for income tax, but that was a heavily Republican-supported policy, to the point that the amendment that allowed for it and the actual legislation was passed under Taft, not Wilson. You can't really blame income tax on Wilson. It's much more of a Republican policy.
This would turn all of America into a plantation.
This is where that argument comes from. I've heard that so many times, where they'll try to say like, well, taxation and like trying to impose welfare on people is actually turning the entirety of the United States into a plantation economy.
Yeah. What plants do we get from that? Free healthcare?
Some of the most like basic humanitarian aid to our own population is deemed to be dependence creating. You just hate black people. Just say it out loud. Don't make this complex conspiracy theory about how the Democrats are the real racists. It's so much projection is what this really ends up being. It's kind of crazy.
It's always projection. Every accusation is a secret confession.
The Democrats are also the party of the black codes, forced sterilization, and sympathy for fascism.
Whoa, hold on a second. Forced sterilization was Republican.
Are you shocked that he said something factually wrong and deceptive?
Yeah, but like everything leading up to that was actually factually correct.
Well, remember, nuance doesn't exist, so all the bad things are together.
Also, there were plenty of Republicans who sympathized with fascism, and a heck of a lot more do today. You could legitimately argue that the entire Republican Party has turned toward fascism. Hell, Trump is openly arguing that he wants to be a dictator. When you deny atrocities, you support their recurrence.
For Indians, reservations.
The reservation system was created by Grant.
I guess he'll have to grant us that one.
Roughly a quarter of the things he's blaming on the Democrats is actually Republican, like just straight up a Republican policy.
The only progress we see is progress for them. More wealth, more power.
Huh, so you're in favor of taxing the rich?
I mean, most people are, in theory.
I don't think Dinesh D'Souza is. Earlier, he was arguing that all taxation is a Democrat policy to plantationize all of us.
I mean, I don't believe he has any consistent ideas.
He's concerned about elite Democrats who continuously get votes from ghettoized black people. So the easy solution to that is to tax the rich people. Billionaires shouldn't exist.
You almost have it. You almost have it. Oh, you just went the racism route.
These black people who are ghettoized, they have no choice of their own. They're just following the Democrats, who obviously have enslaved these people. Only slaves would vote for their masters.
You gotta love how, like, this is trying to go under the guise of, oh, well, you see, we're trying to pull the wool away from the eyes of the poor, innocent black people being tricked here, but then we're just going to deny them any agency as people at all. Heaven forbid the idea that maybe they came to their own conclusions based off of the things that they witnessed. No, they're just these dumbasses who got tricked, the poor things. Are we the bad guys? No, we're not the bad guys. They are. Oh, thanks. I feel so much better.
You want to look at all Republican policies? Because you're not going to like a lot of it, but, you know, that would require some sort of self-reflection. That would require also some sort of, like, study into history. The thing that he claims to have done multiple times in this documentary, but clearly has not.
Some candidates in this race are resorting to ugly, hateful rhetoric.
Hateful rhetoric? The Clintons are hateful people with a...
Burn, I guess?
What the hell was that? I'm sorry. This is supposed to be the culmination of the documentary.
Oh, please, just end it.
What the hell is going on?
They're beating a dead horse is what they're doing. You know, the idea of America, we're fighting the good fight. against the evil Democrats who've tried to ruin it since the beginning. Yeah.
George Washington was a slave owner. This is really, really well publicized.
This is just what they do over and over and over again. I'm like numb to it at this point. I will always love you, America. I'll always love America in the arms of America.
Once again, the party of Lincoln and Reagan must come to America's rescue. Not with bullets this time, but with ballots.
Yeah, we're gonna make things different by not electing Clinton and picking someone who totally won't be even worse.
Yeah.
Sick and tired of this ridiculous shit! If this is the best my party gets, then my party should quit!
While this is 2016, not 2020, Trump was arguing against the legitimacy of voting at this time. He had been doing so for years. Literally, one of his first acts as president was to create a commission to investigate the 2016 election. The dude has never accepted losing.
Because of my conviction, I can't vote. But you can.
I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen.
I don't even know what to say to that. It's just so funny.
And you know who likely passed a law saying that felons couldn't vote? Probably not the Democrats.
Republicans, yeah. The pivot of I can't vote because I'm a felon, so therefore I'm trying to persuade you to vote the way I want you to. I'm not the one projecting my will on others. No, it's the Democrats.
Oh, okay, stop.
God, that's actually how it ends? With him standing on the side of polls. That means that the last line of narration in this movie.
Because of my conviction, I can't vote. But you can.
I told you from the very beginning of this whole series that you were in for a treat with this. A poisonous treat that sent you to a hospital, but a treat.
That was funny. Tyler says that there are 2 more lines at the end of the credits.
Also, that engineer totally doesn't want to be there.
Do you notice how, like, he doesn't know how to high five? He, like, high fives like this, like, and, like, the rest of them are like, please let go. He's a Republican insider. He's awkward by default.
No, but even worse, like, it is genuinely laughable at how cringy he is.
So how will you know when you have become an American? You'll know when you become a Republican.
That's the fantasy he wants to happen in his head, but he knows it never will.
I'm at a loss for words. It's just so stupid. This is funny as hell.
A few minutes later.
How can you even put that into the context of propaganda as an art form? Because what's weird here is that it's so uniquely partisan.
Like, Triumph of the Will was more vague.
But we're more looking at American propaganda and how it evolved. And even the Birchers weren't this partisan. As we've watched all these 21st century propaganda, it started off kind of as like democratizing propaganda, as people were able to create their own films and everything.
We had hope and optimism for the internet and social media and smartphones, but then we realized, oh wait, people suck. I don't mean that like it's because of the internet, I'm just saying it's like the internet in that way.
It seems by the time we get to Dinesh D'Souza to have completely gotten away from democratizing to the point that it's straight up arguing against democracy. You know, vote the way I want you to, or else you're not American. Also, I'm not allowed to vote, so please vote the way I want you to. I don't really know how to square that, because at some point, this democratization of propaganda became a way of reinforcing polarization.
In Michael Moore's case, yes, he is partially preaching to the choir, but he is trying to also aim it at potentially neutral fence sitters who may and try to like sway them over in a way that I think this one just felt more reassuring themselves.
Why isn't there any kind of attempt to reach across the aisle?
This one is also like specifically linked to an election. In that documentary, he's confronting the quote-unquote bad people, whatever you want to call them, and trying to gotcha them. This one, there was none of that. He said things about the quote-unquote bad people, but he's not interacting with them. He's just interacting with yes men and yes women in this case.
Dinesh D'Souza has literally no counter-arguments.
The bar of standards dropped.
It just seems like an easy explanation. There's going to be something happening within the medium of propaganda itself.
They started going extra batshit around 2015.
It just seems like Dinesh D'Souza kind of pioneered the ultimate change from kind of that confrontational style of Michael Moore to just a bunch of yes men promulgating an argument to be repeated ad infinitum. And I don't really like that explanation. Feels like there should be something more to it.
This whole thing that you've been raised your entire life to believe is, oh, we're the perfect main character, nothing bad ever happens to. And then it goes wrong, and because you're blinded by that American exceptionalism, you ask, well, how the hell did it go wrong? Without looking at it logically that there's no American exceptionalism. And so you fill that contradiction with more and more irrational takes. Clearly, it's not my ideas of perfect America are wrong. It must be the brown people. It must be the Democrats. It must be the political opposition. It must be whatever. And the longer that simply clinging on to American exceptionalism keeps failing and things keep getting worse, the more irrational, desperate of an explanation you're going to go with.
The last documentary, D'Souza's point of view was Democrats want to enslave us all and destroy America. How do you argue facts and figures against a holistic views of cartoonish villainy?
We're expecting a rational explanation for something irrational.
Well, we're talking about an art form changing. All things are caused.
The percentage change in society before versus after. 2020, it felt like we went from crazy society to crazy society, but with more butthurt. When I think of American politics before and after 2016, it's a much starker difference. 2016 felt like going over the threshold and there's no return.
It felt like 2020 was trying to do a return to normalcy. Like,
we tried. It worked.
Lowering the level of capital required to make such movies, to make such documentaries, means that you will just have the loudest voices in the room, because anyone who isn't shouting at the top of their lungs doesn't get hurt. The reason why this documentary is so hyper partisan in a way that we haven't seen with all the rest of the propaganda we've watched is because it's actually political polarization affecting propaganda, not the other way around. I'm still somewhat dissatisfied with that explanation, but we could not explain the nuances missing in it. So we moved on to the next piece of propaganda. Maybe you, dear audience, have a better way to explain this conundrum. Tell me in the comments below, and also what you think of this format. Both of these streams were a total of 8 hours, so it took a long time to digest the footage. Maybe I'll do the PragerU ones next, or I could start from the beginning. What do y'all think? Anyways, thanks to my supporters on Patreon for being patient while I take so long to edit these, and don't forget you can buy merch, such as the shirt I'm wearing, and that will help the channel. And once again, thanks to MyHeritage for sponsoring this episode. You can check out a free 2-week trial with the link below. I'll see y'all in the next episode.